So I wanted to close today's show with a story. I've been wanting to tell this story for a while, and it's been a while since I told a story. So here we go. When I was 16, I got my driver's permit. Now here in the United States, back when I was growing up, when you turned 16, you could get your driver's permit, and what that meant was that you could drive, but you had to have a licensed driver in the passenger seat with you. I don't know if that's changed, but that's the way it was for me. So I was very excited about getting my driver's license. I had been driving cars since the time I was probably 9, because we lived so far out in the country. I remember sometimes we'd be coming back from town. My dad would pull over and he said, "Brian, get up here and drive." And then he would get over in the passenger seat, and then I would get into the driver's seat, and I would drive us home from like age 9. And that was my dad's way of teaching me to drive. Now, I have repeated that with my own daughter. So, you hear me talking about criticizing my dad all the time. And I try to emphasize the fact that my dad has many good qualities. First of all, the man is insanely brilliant. For somebody who grew up in the hollers and the hills of Appalachia and just consumed information from the news and from books and from things like that, I mean, he could hold his own against any academic, for sure. So, there's so many good things about my dad. One of those good things is, one of the great things about his parenting was that he looked ahead at things that would really practical things that would benefit me. And he gave me an education in those things. I remember a friend of mine, when he first started to drive, when he went to get his permit, he was driving with his dad. He didn't know that you have to slowly press on the brake, because his father had never allowed him to drive before the day that he went to get his permit. So imagine these things that we take for granted after having driven for 20, 30 years. That day when he went to get his permit, and then he was driving for the very first time, he didn't know something as simple as that when you're coming to a stop sign, you don't just jam on the brake, you slowly push on the brake. He didn't know that. If you think about it, you can apply that to many things in life too. The fact that a person just assumes that you know that, assumes that you know a thing, because it's obvious to you because you've been doing it for a long time, but it's not obvious to another person who is doing it for the very, very first time. So when he and his father come up to that very first stop sign, he just jammed on the brake. And I mean, the car just come to a screeching halt. I'll never forget him telling me that, because I thought, well, how could he not know that? But if you think about it, of course he wouldn't know that, because he was never taught. I, on the other hand, was driving since I was about age 9. So I learned those things from like age 9. So by the time I got my driver's permit, I knew a lot of things. Old Brady over there is getting comfortable. When he gets comfortable, he moans and he's all happy. So anyway, there was a car I had bought. It was a Mitsubishi 626. Mitsubishi 626. I think that was my very first car. I bought it for $150. Didn't run at all. Had the engine and everything in it, but didn't run. So I had to have it towed out to the farm out there where I grew up. Got the engine all tore apart and everything like that, and saw the transmission. The bell of the transmission had a big crack in it. So I know that we had to get that into the town and get somebody to weld that for me. So I took the transmission out of the car, and my father had a big work van. He was a telephone man, and in the back part of the van he had that caged off for his equipment and all that stuff. And so we put the transmission back there. We were going to drive out into town and have somebody weld that transmission for me. So we went to take that in town. I said, can I drive? My dad said, yeah. So I got up there in the driver's seat. My father got in the passenger seat, and my little brother got in with us. He got in the back. So there was no seat in the back. It was me, my dad sitting in a seat in the front, my brother sitting in the back on his knees, and then behind my brother, behind that cage, was this big, massively heavy car transmission. So we all started down. We started driving down the road. I was very comfortable driving at this point, but I had never had a near accident or anything like that. And as we were driving, my dad, he motioned out the passenger side window with his finger, just kind of motioned to the side. And I looked over to see what he was motioning to. And there were some dogs. He thought they were deer. That's why he was motioning over there. He thought they were deer, but they were just a bunch of dogs running through this field. And when I looked back, because I had been looking over into the field where my father had motioned, his work van had strayed over into the berm, the side of the road, and my tires went down into that berm. Well, I made the biggest mistake of all time. I quickly jerked the steering wheel in the opposite direction. We were on a gravel road, and the van popped up out of there, and it started losing control in that gravel. We started fishtailing. Everything was happening so fast. What I did, I'm 16, and I'm in a situation now that I've never been in before. Everything's happening real fast. I panicked, and I pressed on the gas. I tensed up, and I actually pressed on the gas so that the van sped up. We were going faster and faster as we're fishtailing, and I'm trying to correct it. And we lost control. The van did like a U, and then there was this big embankment right there, and we hit the embankment straight on, probably doing, I reckon 50 miles an hour. We hit that embankment straight on. Now here's the situation. I was wearing my seatbelt. My dad was not wearing a seatbelt. And my brother, again, of course, was not wearing a seatbelt because he was in the back on his knees. When we hit that embankment, everything went into slow motion. You hear people say, oh, it happened so fast. Well, it did happen fast, but my memory of the thing is always in slow motion. I saw the embankment there. We hit, crash. Grass, the front windshield blown out, grass flying up into my face. And then I look over to my left, and outside the driver's side window, I saw the road come up to the window. It wasn't like the window went down to the road. Instead, it was like the road flew up to the window. And I threw my hand up because I knew it was going to blow out the driver's side glass window. I threw my hand up to protect my face, and the glass just blew out. It peppered my hand, and I still have some scars in my hand from where the glass peppered my hand. Then the van continued to roll over. Now, I was not thinking about my dad. I wasn't thinking about anybody else. In that sense, it did happen so fast that I didn't have time to think. But in slow motion, what was happening everything that was happening to me was happening in slow motion. The van rolled just like in a movie. When you see like in a movie and they do it in slow motion, a car crash, that's what it was like. And then we ended up back on our wheels. So what had happened was my dad's work van had rolled completely over, boom, on its side, roof, other side, back up on its wheels, and we landed back up on our wheels facing the opposite direction. When we stopped, my father was now in the back with my brother. He had gotten thrown into the back. Now, how he didn't get thrown through the window, I don't know. But he had put his hand out and braced himself on the dashboard. And so when he hit the roof, he hit the down, he just got bounced around like a ping pong ball and got thrown in the back. I remember the first thing my dad did was he jumped up out of the back and he grabbed the gear shift and he jumped it up into park. He says, "You okay?" I said, "I'm okay." He says, I hear him talking to my brother. "You okay?" My brother's okay. Then he jumped out the truck to look things over and to see how, just how bad things were. I remember I realized that the back of my neck was wet. And I reached my hand back here and I felt like the whole back of my neck was just soaking wet. And I got scared. I thought I had been cut and I thought I was bleeding. I said to my brother, hey, what's back here? What's back here? Well, do you know what it was? My brother says, if you imagine him in the back of the van, just sitting on his knees, no seatbelt or anything, he was just like a ping pong ball, ding dong, ding 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 ding, just bouncing off the sides of the walls, which is a miracle. It's a miracle he didn't get thrown out the window and get crushed by the van. But thank God he didn't. And he said that as we were rolling the van, he had his mouth open and the spit was just flying out of his mouth, and the spit from his mouth had all splashed on the back of my neck, and I thought it was blood when I felt that liquid back here. Man, I was sure relieved that it wasn't blood. So my dad got back in the van. "You sure you're okay? You're sure?" "Yeah, everybody's okay." "Well, let's drive this thing back home." So I started the engine started back up, put it into drive, drove that thing back home. The cage in the back of the van where that transmission had been, because you think about that, that's like a 1-ton transmission, had been bouncing around in the van also, and it had left an indent in that cage. You folks who are watching on Rumble or YouTube can see my hands, but an enormous indent. So many things could have gone wrong that day. If that cage had not been there, my brother would have been crushed to a pulp. He would have died. Absolutely no question about it. My father probably would have died. I might have died. The fact that cage was back here separating the transmission of my car from the rest of us in the van saved our lives. Absolutely no question about it. The fact that my dad didn't go through the front windshield, absolutely a freak of coincidence. The fact that my brother didn't go flying out the window, not being in any seatbelt, absolutely a total freak of coincidence. So we got home, and as evil-tempered as my dad was, he was so shook up, and I think he was so relieved that we were all safe, that he handled that so well. He did. There was no yelling. There was no physical abuse. I think he was just completely relieved that all of us survived that, and I'm relieved too. At the time, at 16, when you feel invincible, the gravity of such a thing doesn't really hit you. It's later in life, when you get up into your 30s and 40s and you start thinking back to it and you think about all the things that could have gone wrong. That's when the gravity hits you, that you're just fortunate to be here. And so that's the story. That's the story when I rolled my dad's work van with my transmission in the back.